we're still here. Hi guys, we're still doing it. You guys still awake? So he will rip out your veins with hooks and chains. Are you ready for Pinhead himself, Mr. Jonathan Brad?
Yeah.
If you look at this, he's not ready for you.
Yes, he is. Jesus, it goes on a long way. Can you hear me at the back? Can you? All the way at the back? A little bit. You can't hear me. Is the microphone on? Can you hear me now? Did we get bacon with this Q&A?
Yeah.
I've never done a Q&A at a breakfast food before.
Anyway, it's quite good. How are we feeling about Silver Screen Con?
This is my vodka, is
It is now.
Yeah.
Having done Silver Screen Con in Massachusetts
Yeah.
with us, how are we enjoying London?
Well, I lived in London 20 years. Having been born and raised in Liverpool and lived there until I was 22. And then the month after the Mighty Reds won the European Cup for the first time, I moved down to that London and was here for 30 years, and I've lived in the States now for the last 10 years. So it's, it's always great to be back in London. Extraordinary city, 30 years, and I never ever came to the end of it. Bits of London I've never yet set foot in. Like Barnes. Anyone here from Barnes? There never is. I don't think Barnes exists.
Well, now thanks to Ricky Gervais, us Americans have all heard of Slough.
Slough. Well, it was John Betjeman who put Slough on the map. Come lovely bonds and fall on Slough. It is not fit for humans now.
Watch this.
And the seat of Boris Johnson, I believe, as well. Wasn't that his constituency? Slough?
Oh, is that Orange?
And it's Slough House now.
This is my favorite thing to do at Silver Screen Con. Who here is at your first horror convention?
Well, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Well,
Welcome. Welcome to the family. So I want to ask you something I've never asked you before, which is, obviously we're all a bunch of weirdos who are joined together by our passions and loves of different things. And we have, collectors and obsessive fandoms. What are things that you obsess over as a fan? What are your great loves and passions? Like film, literature, music, things that you just absolutely adore, or if you were to encounter the creator or something, you would be like, oh.
Well, I've already mentioned the Mighty Reds. Abiding passion of my life. My father took me to my first game at Anfield, Boxing Day 1963. Liverpool 6, Stoke City 1, since you asked. I know you care about these things.
I'm a fan of Oasis, so I feel like
Roger Hunt scored 3, and Ian St John got 2, and Alfari Smith scored the spare one. So Liverpool have been an abiding passion in my life from then until now. So that's an obsessive thing, certainly. Music, yes. Across a whole range of things. You won't be surprised to hear, given my birthplace and the fact that I was 7 and kind of becoming aware that this thing called pop music, as we knew it then, existed at pretty much the same time that I heard Love Me Do on the radio, and I kind of track my musical processes through a series of what the fuck is this? And that was the first one. So as I was becoming aware that pop music existed, the Beatles and my city were about to become the epicenter of it, and of course everybody in Liverpool was immensely proud of the Beatles being from Liverpool, and they have been an abiding passion for me also through my life, which has never waned. It's an extraordinary thing. I never get tired of hearing the music. I love watching those videos on YouTube of people watching the Beatles for the first time. And one of the ones I watched was a young black girl, I would say probably late teens, maybe very early 20s. And my first question always is, how the fuck do you get to that age without ever hearing the Beatles? And they were just playing a few songs, and they weren't playing like, you know, the huge well-known hits. It wasn't like Hey Jude and Strawberry Fields. And it was earlier stuff. I Should Have Known Better was one of them, which is a great favorite of mine. And she starts listening, and she starts to nod her head, and she started to do this, and she started to smile. She said, "Wow, how is this so good?" And I thought, that's the question. That's the question with them, and I still don't know the answer. How is this so good over and 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 over again? And when you think of the journey that they made, you know, I Should Have Known Better, and then from, only just thinking recently of this, from Help via Rubber Soul to Revolver to Sgt. Pepper to the Double White Album is 3 years. And most bands, having made Sgt. Pepper, you wouldn't hear from them for the next 5 years. 1 year later, they're coming out with what for me is the greatest album ever made. The first single I bought with my own money, Rushworths and Drapers in Liverpool, was She Loves You, and the first album I bought with my own money was the Double White Album. And I stood in line at a record shop, waiting for it to open at 9 o'clock on the day of release, having heard not a note of it, because they never put their singles on the albums because they thought that would rip the fans off. And I played that album so relentlessly I broke it. It's amazing. And then you think that in that same year, they release Hey Jude with Revolution on the B-side, and Lady Madonna with George's The Inner Light on the B-side of that. And then comes Abbey Road, and then comes Let It Be. And they never put a foot wrong. I still can't quantify it. I think I listen to a lot of new music still, and I find quite often listening to new bands, and I still like to listen to albums in their entirety. I'll listen to the first track and I'll think, that's good, I like that, and I listen to the second track and I think, yeah, I like that. Sounded a lot like the first track. And then I'll listen to the third track and I'll think, yeah, I'm still liking this. It sounded a lot like the first 2 tracks. The same rhythms, the same tempo, the same instrumentation, the same kind of melody lines. And the Beatles were extraordinary, I think, and they seem to have an ability to meet a song on its own terms and say, what do you want to be? Well, okay, we'll go with you, you know. So their ability to move from yesterday to Love Is the Word, to Tomorrow Never Knows, to A Day in the Life, to your blues and Helter Skelter and Revolution 9, you know, which it's weird, but that's a piece of madness on the Double White Album, Revolution 9. It's one of my favourite Beatles tracks. It's kind of nuts. Anyway, I could talk for the whole.
When you were saying even how some of those records were compacted into just a few years, the entirety of their career is just like a decade.
Is the Please Me album is 62 and by 17 they're done.
I mean, that's
It's all
insane.
it's all in 7-8 years. It's and particularly when you look at one of my favourite books is a book by a guy called Ian McDonald called Revolution in the Head, and he goes through every single Beatles track in order that they were recorded, and he tells you the dates of the recording and who played what, and then he talks about the song, and some of them are just a short paragraph. A Day in the Life is like a 10-page sociological essay, and in the addendum at the back, he gives you their touring schedule. They never stopped. They were in Sweden. They were touring Britain. They were in the States. They were in France. They were at the BBC doing recordings. And they never stopped. And then they're in the studio, and boom, album. And then they're back on the road again. And then they're back in the studio. Boom, couple of singles, album. Absolutely relentless pace. And what I love is that, we're supposed to believe that by the end of it all, they couldn't stand each other and they weren't talking to each other. Anyone who's watched the entirety of Get Back, the full documentary, Pete Jackson's documentary, that's not true.
Yeah.
Their love for each other was as intact at the end, and every moment that Paul and John stand up and face each other to sing together, boom, it's there.
And I feel like if they hadn't split up, we wouldn't have All Things Must Pass. We wouldn't have, there were so many great things that happened.
Well, that's a triple album, and that's because George had so many songs exactly songs that he couldn't get released as Beatles songs. I guess if you're in a band with Lennon and McCartney, it's you're not helping yourself. But I don't think they treated George particularly well, to be honest, because he's a great songwriter, and some of his songs are, if he'd never gone near the Beatles and had only released a lot of his songs, including Something and While My Guitar Gently Weeps and so forth, including the ones that we get later, If Not For You. I know that's a Bob Dylan song, but his cover of that is just so beautiful. He would have been able to make a career for himself as a solo artist, I've no doubt about it.
Have you had an opportunity in your travels, and not to say that you can't still have, to meet any of the Beatles?
This would be 1993, I think. I'm in the States doing publicity for the release of Hellraiser 3. And Miramax decided in their infinite wisdom that they would really like me to do a lot of publicity appearances in makeup and costume to help with the release of the movie, which I was a little bit kind of not too thrilled about.
Yeah, to them, is it putting all that on, so no big deal.
Well, they agreed to pay me $1,000 every time I did it, so I said, okay, bring it on. So one of these things was the MTV Music Video Awards. I don't know whether anybody remembers or how familiar you would have been, but some of you may not have been born in 1993, I don't know. They used to do this thing called the Music Video Awards where David Spade, they would film these separately and then include them in the awards.
Like little comedy sketches.
Yes. He would be sitting outside with a list, and there would be celebrities trying to get in who weren't on the list. So, I don't care who you are, you're not on the list. So that year, there were 4 celebrities who couldn't get in. Andrew Dice Clay, that dates it. Roseanne, Pinhead, and Ringo Starr. So I put the makeup on in my hotel room in Beverly Hills. That's a story in and of itself, because we leave my hotel room, we get into the elevator, the lift, as I've been reminding myself to call it. And we start to go down, and we stopped, and the elevator doors open, and here's a businessman standing staring at me. And there was a kind of pause, and he took a step backwards, and he said, "It's okay." And the doors closed. And I developed a game I used to play. They put me in a stretch limo, and I realised that if at a stoplight, if I got it right, I could press the button to bring the window down and just look at look at the guy in the car next to me waiting for the light to change. And if it worked right, he'd just catch what was looking at him, and then the light would change, and I'd just go. So I arrived. They were recording everything that year at the auditorium at UCLA. So I arrived, and I got out of the car, and the PR girl came over, and said, "Oh, that's great. We're so delighted to have you with us." I think a bit grand, a bit special. Why shouldn't I? She said, "Well, we'd just like to bring you over here if you could just come into the entrance to the auditorium. Elton John and Eric Clapton are rehearsing at the moment," she said. "Okay. Oh, and Ringo's here." So I walked down and I turned left, and there is this person with a strange kind of turban on, with his back to me, talking to, I think, like 3 guys, who, looking over that guy's shoulder, I saw that, and then they said something, and it was Ringo, of course. I'll stand up for this, because this was a moment in my life. He turned around and he did this. "Hey, it's Pinhead." Now, some of you I know sometimes apologize when you come to my table, because you're a bit anxious and nervous, and you've got a lot of things you want to ask me and you can't remember any of them, and you're a bit hesitant, or the mouth goes into overdrive. I fully understand and sympathise with your situation. So I'm introduced to Ringo, and I had the Homer Simpson brain moment. The brain says, "Don't tell him you're from Liverpool too." And the mouth says, "I'm from Liverpool too." And he was wonderful. He was wonderful, and with all due respect to Ringo, who I think he gets run down a lot, I think. People quote seriously John's comment after the Memorabilia Awards, when they won everything. And he was asked, "Do you think Ringo is the best drummer in the world?" And John said, "He's not even the best drummer in the Beatles." And people thought he meant it, which of course he did not. But I always say, with all due respect to Ringo, that was just meeting Ringo. George or Paul, John, nothing. Thank you, and run away. That would be it. So I understand that I was wobbly at the knees, but it was. We had our photograph taken today together in that moment with his funny turban on, and we were on the front page of the Hollywood Reporter the next day. It was pretty cool. So yes, Ringo.
Yeah.
I went to the same school in Liverpool as John Lennon, which was a source of great pride for me. I used to tell people I'm going to that school because that's John Lennon's school. John was my three great heroes from that time, late 60s into the 70s, was Bill Shankly, manager of Liverpool in the 1960s, John, and Clive, who the day that changed my life, I think it's 1969, I got cast in the school play at Quarryman, was told to report for rehearsals, and I turned up for rehearsals and met my fellow cast members, the government inspector by Nikolai Gogol, which included this fellow by the name of Clive Barker, who I was vaguely aware of around the school. And that was the day that changed my life.
You guys know who Clive Barker is, yeah? You're seeing it now? Woo! Yeah, and your Ringo story, it reminds me of the great SNL sketch, the Chris Farley show. Remember when you were in the Beatles?
Yes.
That was cool.
Yes, it was, yes.
Yeah.
That was great, wasn't it?
And then he asked him about other.
Yes.
Is that true? In the end. So we have a microphone here. Please, someone's got to break the ice. Once one person gets a nice cue going, get it out. And I'm reminded that because I know you're a fan of the band Ghost, and talking about your Beatles fandom. Ghost is. I mean, it's another thing in that lineage of Beatles. You can find the DNA of the Beatles.
Well, and it's of course, it's an extraordinary. Sorry, I didn't intend to talk about the Beatles very much, but it's an extraordinary thing that so many people, so many new artists still today, when they're asked about their influences, will cite the Beatles. And I mentioned Revolution '9. A lot of experimental digital artists and DJs will point to Revolution 9, which their parents used to play when they were kids, and how that made such a huge impression on them.
Of course, we just lost the great Ozzy Osbourne, and he had no bigger hero than the Beatles. I mean, that was
Constant, walking down the street, singing like you do, absolutely great. Now, sorry, in a moment I promise, because it's a horror convention moment. I was at Texas Frightmare Weekend in Dallas, 2015, I think, or thereabouts, 13 maybe, rather. Ghost came onto the floor of the convention, unannounced, of course in full fig, because they didn't exist outside Ghost at that point. It was only Papa and the ghouls. And they came to my table and they lined up with me behind the table. The entire fucking place came to a standstill. Taking pictures. And this person to my right is muttering to me. I realized what they were saying was, we're playing the House of Blues tonight. We'd love you to come. So the staff, my wife who was with me, we said sure, because it seemed rude to say no. Now, I am a huge disappointment to my fans, because while I love music across a wide range, I don't do heavy metal.
He's on several Cradle of Filth albums.
Yeah, right.
I am. Well, yes, I've said to Dan, now I think we should change their name to Doc Bradley and Craig and Phil, because they're clearly only my backing band, really. I've done 5 albums with Danny now. I love Danny to death, I think he's brilliant, but I don't listen to Craig and Phil for pleasure. So, when we finished the convention, we went up to the hotel and we said, should we find out what the fuck we're going to listen to tonight? Now, I was aware of the image of Ghost, and I expected to be hearing stuff. And we found some Ghost stuff on YouTube, and we started listening, and we were, what the fuck is this? There's another what the fuck is this moment. We went to the gig and we completely fell in love. My one regret was my wife is a brilliant artist, and the guy who looked after Ghost's merch then wanted to buy some stuff from her, and he said the best time to come to talk to me, if you don't mind, is during the gig, because that's the only time I'm quiet. So we did. We a few songs in, we said we should go and talk to him. So we scuttled away. We missed maybe 2 songs, which included, and he's never done it since, his cover of "Here Comes the Sun." And I missed it. Well, we met the band afterwards and talked to them all. And you know, Toby's kind of a friend now, Tobias, as we're now allowed to call him. So, yes.
Your name and where you're from and your question, and also your shirt's amazing.
Thank you. I'm Joe Cates and I'm from Bath. I've got 2 questions if you don't mind. The first one's a bit of a nerdy law question.
A bit of a what?
Nerdy law question.
Nerdy
Law.
law.
As in like Hellraiser law.
Okay. So L-O-R-E?
Yes.
Lore.
So that he wants to talk about the lore.
It's either lore or it's law.
Nerdy law.
It sounds like, I don't know, it sounds like either laws of underground national or a football. I don't know. I'm sorry.
No worries. So Pinhead seems to be like the arbiter of the laws around the box and Leviathan. And on occasion, he has let people go who are not innocent or who were forced to open the box. In Hellraiser Inferno, there is a deleted scene in which he is goading Kirsty and saying that Trevor is actually in hell, yet he did nothing wrong. Now, is he specifically goading Kirsty to get some results out of her, or do you think Trevor is actually in hell along with Frank and the rest of the family?
Well, you're right in the first part of your statement, and most obviously when Tiffany opens the box in Hellbound and the Cenobites pile in and then Pinhead says, no, it is not hands that call us, it is desire. So it's not just the physical process of opening the box that matters, it's the motivation behind the desire to open the box and meet the Cenobites that matters. The second half of your question, blank. I didn't know there was a deleted scene. I don't. This is Hellseeker we're talking about?
This is Inferno.
Kirsty's not in Inferno. No, you're talking about Kirsty and Trevor. That's Hellseeker.
This is where
Inferno is the 5th movie
Kirsty.
with Craig Shepard.
Oh, I'm talking about the 6th movie then.
You are. Yeah, you're talking about Hellseeker. Nerdy law. Now, Hellseeker's complicated because I get the script for Hellseeker and I start reading, and here's a character called Kirsty, and I thought, oh, they're bringing Kirsty back. Oh, wait a minute, this isn't Kirsty. And I thought, this is kind of odd. It's an odd thing to do, to have a main character in a movie, in sequels in a franchise and call that person after one of the principal people in the original stories. And they had a dog called Cotton, which was Kirsty's last name in Hellraiser, surname, last name in America, surname in England. I was not allowed to talk to Rick Bota, who was going to direct Hellseeker, until my deal was in place. And Miramax being Miramax, that always took a while. But when we finally got to talk, I said this to Rick. I said, you know, the weird thing is when I started reading the screenplay, I assumed that this was Kirsty, but clearly not. And he said, "Oh my God, I wish it was." And I raised the same question, and we tried to get Ashley, and we got nowhere. And I said, "Oh, do you want me to call her?" And he said, "Would you?" And I said, "Sure." So I called Ashley and said, "Would you like to do another Hellraiser film?" And of course she wanted to. I think her agents had just not sent her the script for whatever reason. So they took it on board and they started basically changing the script to accommodate the idea of this being the original Kirsty, now married to Trevor, thinking she's put her past in the rearview mirror. Pinhead having other ideas because, as far as he's concerned, he made a bargain with her that she welched on, and he wants that payment. The scene you're referring to, I honestly don't remember. I honestly don't remember, so I can't answer your nerdy law question.
That's fine. I've got a fun question as well.
I was going to say, now what's your next question?
Excluding Shinard, if Pinhead was to be put into a boxing ring, any of the other Cenobites, which Cenobite do you think would have the best chance of beating Pinhead?
None of them. I don't know. I suppose Butterball could lie on top of him and suffocate him. I don't know. No, Pinhead. No contest.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Your name and where you're from, please.
Hi, Isabel. I'm from Cayman Island. I might suggest it now. So my question is...
From where?
Last night the mic was too high up, so...
No, from where did you say?
Oh, sorry, Cayman Islands.
Cayman Island.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So my question, what was it like working with Voltaire on the Demonatrix?
Oh, right. Well, I already knew Voltaire because I'd run across him on the convention circuit several times, talked to him, and he used to play at some of the conventions, and I'd gone to hear a few of his songs. So it was cool. And the movie this is a movie called Demonatrix. Possibly Demonatrix over here, I'm not sure really, but in the States anyway, it's Demonatrix, in which I play a retired priest turned demonologist with a dicky heart, of course, because just before that I was in a movie called The Exorcists, plural, in which I played an exorcist with a dicky heart. Because every priest who's an exorcist has a dodgy heart. Right? Every one of them. The Exorcist and Amityville Horror, they're all dropping like flies. So it was great, but as I say, I already knew him, so it was an easy working relationship.
Thank you. I'm also one of the first people to see that movie.
Okay, did you like it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I haven't seen it yet. So I have a code to go and watch it. I haven't just got around to it yet. Good. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was going to say Demonatrix, I definitely dated her. Your name and your question.
Hi guys, Austin from Sheffield. And I know you just said you're not a metal guy, but obviously Motorhead, their song was used in Hellraiser 3. Did you
And what would Lemmy have said to you?
to me?
Lemmy, at this point, Lemmy's interrupting and saying, we are not a heavy metal band.
Wow.
We are a rock and roll band. That's all we ever were. That's what Lemmy said.
And you know, Filthy Animal said the same thing too. R.I.P. everyone from the classic lineup said that.
Right.
Shame on me.
But also he's wrong.
I'm just saying on behalf of the mighty Lemmy.
Well, that was my question. Did you have a chance to interact with Lemmy much, or did you see him much around the filming of
Well,
Hellraiser
so
3?
here again is the moment where I roll up in downtown LA, in the limo, not yet in makeup and costume. That's we were shooting in. This is for the Hellraiser song, written by Ozzy. But Ozzy didn't want to record it. I don't know why. Maybe he's trying to live down a reputation or something. I don't know. But he kind of gave it to Lenny. And as we were shooting in what was a beautiful condemned old theatre. Would have been an old vaudeville theatre in downtown LA. And as we pull up the sidewalk, here's this figure pacing up and down outside the theatre. And I got out of the limo and realised it was Lenny. And I was introduced to him, and he said hello, and he said, "Do you smoke?" I said, "I do." I did then, I don't now. I said, "Yes. Do you want a ciggy?" I said, "I'd love one." So that was the start of it. Was sharing a cigarette with Lenny out on the sidewalk in downtown LA. The interaction with him was basically when we played the card scene. Where anyone who's not familiar with the video, Pinhead and Lenny play a game of cards across the table, and well, I think you can guess what happens. Because Lenny plays the so we're on opposite sides of this card table, and there was a kind of a flagon thing, and empty as a prop, with a couple of, what would you call those things? Like a Middle Ages, medieval.
Like a goblet?
A goblet is the word I'm looking for. A couple of those in front of them. We're chatting now. We discovered that we have a great love of English comedy in common, and going back to like Beyond Our Ken and Round the Horn and Ken Dodd and all of that fine stuff, up to and including, of course, Monty Python and Spike Milligan and so forth. So we're kind of comparing these notes. All this while, I'm aware that Lanny's eyes keep going towards the thing, and then he had a word with his people, and that was taken away. And we carried on chatting, and a few minutes later, it came back again, now filled with amber liquid. I don't think any coke was involved. And we continued while Lenny worked his way through the amber fluid like you and I might drink orange juice, while the dark pope of pain demurely sipped Evian water on the side of the table. And then the day, it was quite a long day, and the day concluded with us all, including me, sitting in the stalls watching Motorhead playing Hellraiser live. He got a little bit, there was a moment, kind of by about 11 o'clock at night, where he'd get up from a chair and there'd just be a moment of that. But, You worried for him. He was, no, I mean it. I meant it because I cared about them and I cared for him. You cannot drink that much. We know you cannot drink that much and stay sober and be in a good place. You can't. You can't. And I talked to his manager and he said, I call him every morning. If he doesn't pick up by the 5th ring, I'm panicking. So anyway, wonderful guy.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Yeah, great question.
I'm Michael from Glasgow.
I'm half Scottish on my mother's side.
I love like uncanny natural phenomena that makes you just ponder and think about I don't know, it just makes you think about more. I know it sounds very vague and weird. On the plane here, I was sat next to someone who lives down the street from Clive Barker. Yeah, told me, because I was reading Hellraiser part on the way here. I told me about there was an abandoned block of flats down the road with an out-of-service lift shaft, and he said that was an inspiration behind for Clive Barker thinking about Portal to Hell. Is there anything
Thinking about what, sorry?
a portal to hell?
A bottle to hell. And this would be where, in Liverpool? Or
In Liverpool, yeah.
in Liverpool? I think you might be talking about Candyman. And I think there's particularly a walkway to the old Walton quarries as well that would be involved in that. You might have been talking about the old ballroom, not to be confused with the Birmingham ballroom, but in Liverpool. And I know those two things came together as an inspiration for Candyman, which in Books of Blood is set in Liverpool, got transposed to Chicago for the movie. Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, Candy Eraser, that's the guy. Is there anything that you've seen, any kind of natural phenomena where you've been in like an abandoned building or a cave or anything like that, where you just looked at it and stopped for a second and kind of been slight job in awe?
I've always been fascinated by ghosts, and I've done a fair share of ghost hunting, I suppose. I'm very skeptical and very open-minded. One of our favourite places to go is a place called Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum it's actually near Wheeling in West Virginia, but it's not too far from where we live, just outside Pittsburgh. And I've never been there without very strange things happening. Seen? No. So I've never seen a ghost, other than on stage. But as I say, not being there without something inexplicably strange and sometimes very dramatically strange happening. Owl things, particularly. So I've never seen a ghost, and I've had other experiences as well. And when that is happening, everybody always talks about the spirits, and everybody assumes they're talking to spirits. And I don't know that they ever have any evidence for that. So I don't say that. I just know that I've had those things that I can't explain. I do believe that buildings retain atmospheres. I'm a stone tape believer. We all know those, those houses that you go into that you don't feel comfortable in. Those houses that you go in where you immediately feel very relaxed. I do believe that places carry their own atmospheres. And I am talking about more. I am currently addicted, and in fact, I nearly this morning put my T-shirt on, addicted to the legend, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, which is quietly blowing my mind. I said I'm skeptical about ghosts. I'm hyper skeptical about aliens and UFOs. I don't know where this is going. It is extraordinary, and the phenomenon that they record and they're experiencing is right across the board. So, yes, I'm very interested and fascinated in all of those areas of things.
Thank you.
More things in heaven and earth than are dreamed of in your philosophy, Horatio, as Shakespeare put it.
Hello, my name's Alan. I'm from Southend. I want to know how much of the
I
Pinhead.
went swimming in Southend once. Shopping after I'd seen Jaws. It wasn't too far offshore, and I panicked. Anyway, carry on.
I just wanted to know how much of the Pinhead you see in the films is your take on him, or how much of it you were told to act that way.
Well, it's always a combination of those things. It's always a combination of those things. By virtue of the fact that it's me playing the character as opposed to somebody else playing the character. You know, if somebody else played the character, the performance would be slightly different. That's unavoidable. And it's always true regardless of what character I'm playing. But yes, you listen to what the director is saying, and you talk to the director probably before you start filming about who the character is and where you want to go with it. And sometimes the director will say, you know, I wonder if you've thought about this or that, or you want to try something that the director doesn't think fits. That give and take always goes on. But it's never a question of being told how to play something. Only a bad director would ever tell an actor, this is how you must do it. In the case of Pinhead, it was different anyway, because I had spent 10 years working with Clive in the theatre prior to Hellraiser. And I had also been up close and personal to all his other creative work, his writing and his drawing and his painting, and, you know, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of conversation about everything under the sun. So I knew where I knew where he was with Pinhead, if that doesn't sound arrogant. I knew what he was doing. I got one note from him. He got very excited because he's looking through the camera and he's seeing this thing that he dreamt up. He's seeing it in frame for the first time. And he's very excited. And when Clive gets excited, everybody gets excited because his excitement is tremendous and he communicates it to you. One note from him. This is fantastic, this is great. You've no idea, this looks so wonderful. Do less. Okay, all right, so think about it and you take it down a bit. Back he comes. It's amazing. You have no idea. It's fantastic, it's wonderful. Oh my God, it's amazing. Do less. Really? Yeah, just do less. Okay. And back he came again with the same thing. Now and it's difficult because as an actor, if you take it down and take it down and take it down, you begin to feel like you're just standing on your mark, saying words, and you're not emoting anything. It's exactly what, in a kind way, Clive was edging me to do. What he was saying was, that makeup on a big screen, you don't need to do anything to sell that. It's selling itself. And the deader you are, the more completely deadpan your face is, with these words coming out of your mouth, it's sold. That was what of course, what I couldn't do was get outside of my head and see what everybody else was seeing. That's where he was taking me to come to a place of complete stasis from which to threaten to tear people's souls apart. So,
Thank you.
okay. Your name and where you're from?
I'm Connor from Harlem.
I have a question about Hellraiser Blood.
From where, sorry?
Harlow.
Harlow, good old Essex.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, in regards to the Hellraiser Bloodline, what was your initial thought when they told you to have a space element to it?
Well, there's a backstory to this, because an actor called Ken Carpenter, who played he played the photojournalist who became the camera-headed Cenobite in Hellraiser 3. While we were filming in North Carolina, he sat down in the bar with me at some point during filming, and he said, I've got a great idea for Hellraiser 4. And I said, oh, really? What's that, Ken? He said, I think they realize that the power of you and the cube is so great that the only way they can deal with this is to send you into outer space. And they think they've got rid of you by doing that, but they haven't. And you find a space station, and you know, I'm kind of, you know, no more fire water for Ken, please. So I kind of, you know, laughed it off and thought, what a stupid idea. And then Clive decides that we're going into outer space in Bloodline. And of course, then what a great idea! What a fantastic idea! It seemed odd, but there it is in the screenplay, so it's my job as an actor to deal with it. And the more I started to think about it, the more I thought, well, in a lot of ways they belong together, because that, what we've just been talking about, that place of emptiness and unwavering, there's no negotiating. This thing is cold and it's distant and it does not mean you well, which is rather how I feel about the universe. They kind of belonged together. But also, the point of the final part, as Pete Atkins, of course, who wrote the screenplays for Hellbound and Hell on Earth and Bloodline, brilliant writer, and the third member of the Hellraiser Scouse Mafia. It's a great story, which Pete tells, so he won't mind repeating. He was at home in Liverpool, and Clive called him from LA, and Pete was writing stories and working on a novel at the time. And Clive said to him, Pete, have you ever written a screenplay? And Pete said, no. And Clive said, if somebody calls you from Los Angeles in the next 15 minutes, would you lie? And Pete said, yes. And a phone call came from Los Angeles, we'd like you to write the screenplay for Hellbound. Do you have prior experience with writing screenplays? Oh, sure. Screenplays? Yes, no problem. So that's how Pete got the gig for Hellbound, on Clive's recommendation. But Clive knew what he was doing, and Pete wrote brilliantly. The whole point of that was that it's the bloodline, and that Merchant knows that this is the way to end the bloodline. He knows he's not going to have children, so you bring him and Pinhead together. The main configuration becomes the Elysium configuration. Welcome to Oblivion, which was Merchant's line. Boom. That's the end of Bloodline. Dimension Films, in their infinite wisdom, started popping around at the ending. There were never any SWAT teams originally on the Space Station, and they wanted to make a happy ending. The best ending I saw is not the ending of the movie. The best ending is after the explosion, everything kind of resolves itself into a swirling mass of stuff, which becomes a lament configuration spinning against the backdrop of the universe, and a hand comes into frame and gets hold of the box, and you travel down with the hand in the box, and you're on the toymaker's bench back at the beginning of the film, and it's a time loop. Wow, which is much better than the ending that they gave you. Yes.
That would have been a really interesting ending to a bad movie. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
And unfortunately, we are going to run out of time, so we'll try to get these next three.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jay. I'm British. I want to ask if there was any really memorable moments on set.
I get asked this a lot, and I don't collect moments. There are lots of memorable moments, and we don't have time, I'm afraid. Honestly, it's moments where everything comes together, where everything happens. It's like people ask me, did you ever get scared making the movies? No, absolutely not. But there are moments when you feel that the atmosphere, and everybody's slightly holding their breath. In the torture rooms, or when Joey comes back to the nightclub and Pinhead's created the audience of death for, all the suffering of strangers, the agony of friends. That speech, the song at the centre of the heart, raises through flesh. It's those moments where you just feel, poof, bang. That's why we do this, but not specifically.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Hi there.
It's my very first autograph of the weekend. It'll be almost my last question. I'm worried about the person behind you, by the way. Go ahead.
It's Dan from Brentwood Essex. What I want to ask is that, there's so many questions asked you, but this is the definitive question. What did you think of Paul McCartney's couple's final touch on Cups and Cakes?
I don't think I know. Did you say final touch?
It's from the Spinal Tap's, he did a cover of Cups
Oh, is this
and
the new
Cakes.
Spinal Tap?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I haven't seen it, so no. So I don't know. Is it better than the Frog Chorus?
Well, you could come back to me and tell me.
I will do.
I noticed it's playing on Virgin, so it's playing Virgin back.
Okay. No,
I was
I'm not
watching those.
American/British anyways.
Thank you very much.
And our last question, tell us your name and where you're from.
Are you wet down there?
I'm Kevin from London. I was wondering how long.
London's a big place. Be more specific.
9 hours.
9 Elms. Ah, The Optimists of 9 Elms. You know that movie? The Optimists? You have to go. You have to go and track that film down. It's a Peter Sellers movie, set in 9 Elms, and it's a beautiful film. Anyway, your question.
I was wondering how long it will take to do all your prosthetics, like the pins.
Yeah, and that changes over the years, right?
Early days it was about 5 or 6 hours. Everybody was kind of feeling their way with the whole thing. It's sped up to about 3 or 4. Sometimes under great duress, because of necessity, a bit quicker than that, but generally about 3 or 4 hours. And everybody's always very impressed on my behalf when I tell them that. But I point out that I didn't do anything. I sat on my backside and drank coffee and listened to music and asked for cigarette breaks. And that was the sum total of my contribution to the process. It's the makeup guys that you should be impressed by, because they are working all that time, with bent backs on their feet for all those hours to make sure that this makeup is, perfect when they're done with it. But that's generally how long the makeup took.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for your
Thank
question. So I'm going to be embarrassing when I say this, but I have to. The great, the legendary, the iconic, the masterful Doug Bradley.